But so then they wheel me down to where the ultrasound is, and they like park me, and the ultrasound tech comes out, and she makes me stand up and like walk into the room, and I'm trying to hold my gown closed, and she's holding my I don't know what it's called, the collection bag from the catheter, and it was like so awkward to walk. And so I walked in there, and this was probably the most sad part of the whole experience. Well, not the most sad, but it was really sad. So I had to lay down on the table, and it was dark in there, and the table where I was laying was here, and then the ultrasound equipment was right next to it. So I couldn't see anything, and so she had me lay down, and she did the ultrasound on my stomach, and I was so terrified. I was so scared. I didn't want to ask her, like, oh, how's the baby measuring? Do you see the heartbeat? Where's my placenta? I was just terrified, and at first I was like watching the expressions on her face, then I stopped, because I was like, I don't want to try and interpret what she's saying or thinking or whatever. And then after she did that for a little while, she said, oh, now we need to do, before she actually did it, she had a bag of IV fluid, and she filled my bladder, which was uncomfortable, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as my 20-week ultrasound with my son, because I think I drank way too much water for him, and that was like so painful. I just wanted it to be over with, because I had to pee so bad. But so then once she was done with the scan on my stomach, she emptied my bladder and did an internal ultrasound, which was pretty uncomfortable. It was really awkward, because I had an internal ultrasound with my son at 12 weeks, because they couldn't hear the heartbeat on the Doppler, and I think it's just because of that fat stomach. And also my uterus is posterior, so it leans to the back, so they had to do an internal ultrasound then. And it was done by a doctor, but it was super awkward, because this time the lady told me, she's like, oh, put your hand here and insert it like a tampon. She made me put the wand in. It was I was like, well, okay, yeah, sure. I was like, I know it's a TMI, but it was super strange, because they didn't do that before. And the only thing she said to me then was that she was looking for my ovaries, and she was rocking it to the side, and that was pretty painful. So then she finished looking, and then what else happened? And then she went out of the room to input whatever findings she had, and then she came back, and she was inputting more into the computer in the room, and then she was like, okay, well, I'm going to take you back. So then we walked back out of the room, and that was awkward too, her holding my bag of pee and trying to walk. And so then she wheeled me back into the ER, into my room, and a few minutes later the doctor came in and told us that we had indeed they said that it was either a missed miscarriage or a threatened miscarriage, or that it could be a pregnancy that was 5 weeks, which I knew that couldn't be the case, because I was 10 weeks and I had not a blood test. I had taken 3 home pregnancy tests, and I had actually gone and got a test done by my doctor with my urine. And I knew that there was no way that I could only be 5 weeks pregnant. So she's told us, that these things happen and yada yada yada. And then I didn't cry when she said that. I waited till she left the room And me and my husband just looked at each other and just cried. And then a different nurse came in and took my vitals and took out my IV. And then she said, someone will be in to discharge you. And the first nurse who had checked me in and taken my blood was the one who came in to discharge us. And he was a really nice guy. And he said, you know, the statistics on miscarriage and how some statistics even say half of pregnancies end in miscarriage. And I'd stopped crying at that point, like before he came in, because I'm the kind of person who I like to hold it together when other people are around. And I feel like I need to hold it together for my son and my husband, and I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like I don't need to share those emotions with people who I don't know and stuff like that. So, then he said that him and his wife had just gone through a miscarriage and that their baby would have been due around then. And I just started to cry because even before I had known that I had a miscarriage, I was watching other women's videos like the week before, and I just bawled my eyes out because I just can't. It's just so sad. It's so sad, and I was hurting for myself, and I was hurting for him. And then he said, you know, what his doctor told him to do was go home and have a big cry. And he told my husband, you know, it'll hit you differently than it hits her. You'll just be sitting around one day and it'll just hit you. And he was really, really sweet. And so then he left the room, and me and my husband hugged. And I think then I had to change my son's diaper too. So, and then we got up and left the hospital, and we really cried all day. And then, of course, my favorite show was Grey's Anatomy, and it was on that night. And, of course, it was a musical event episode. So Callie gets into a car accident, and she's 23 weeks pregnant. And, like, oh, my God. It was just, me and my husband just sat on the couch and held each other and cried the whole episode. Like, but she doesn't really like the show, but he was watched it with me. So we were really sad. And the next day, I called my OB nurse and told her, or was it the next day? No, I think I called her that night and told her, you know, what the ER had told us and that, you know, where do I go from here? And she called me back the next day and said that that we'd keep the appointment that I already had on the 4th, and that morning I should go right when the lab opens to get my HCG levels checked to see if they'd gone down. Oh, and I forgot to mention that my levels on the 31st were 8,000, and for someone who's 10 weeks, their levels should be 50,000, I think. I think it was 50,000. But so it was way above what I was. So I got my levels checked on Monday, and then I went to the doctor, and I had to explain everything to them, and they were all confused, like, oh, it says it's your initial OB appointment, and I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to be. I was looking forward to this day, and now this day is what I never wanted it to be. I explained my story to that doctor, and he said that it sounded like I had not that I hadn't had a missed miscarriage. It sounded like a threatened miscarriage. And my levels on Monday, which was April the 4th, were down to 1900. And then I had my levels checked on the 11th, and they were down to around 70. And so I have to get my levels checked again on the 18th because they want my levels to be below 50. Which I've always heard that if your levels are 5 and below, that you're not pregnant, but they go by 50, so I don't know. So on the 18th, I have to go get my levels checked again. And so on